Alrighty, we're going to talk about how to navigate acute sleep deprivation. This is not a method to get away with not sleeping. It just means if you normally sleep 7 to 9 hours and you only slept 1 to 3 today, you can probably function as normally and not affect tomorrow either. For those of you with short attention spans, how do you do it? Well, you slam, probably not decaf, coffee, but not too much of it. 1 to 2 cups is plenty. Do not overdo it. That will have a cost for the next day. L-theanine. This is going to take some of the edge off that caffeine. It's actually going to improve the effects of caffeine anyway, and it's going to promote some calming neurotransmission through glutamate agonism and GABA agonism. On top of that, creatine monohydrate used in high doses, so not the usual 5 grams. You're looking at 15 to 30 grams, maybe even 40 grams, depending on the size of the individual here. High sleep debt results in high neural inflammation. This has been shown to clear that. On top of that, another amino acid we could look at is L-tyrosine. This is the precursor to dopamine and other catecholamines. In theory, by replacing that precursor, you allow proper neurotransmission, mood, function, etc. Today, that's not been shown in studies, but it has been shown in studies to improve cognitive function during sleep deprivation. The mechanism of action is unknown. If you're going a little bit more funky, something like methylene blue, there's not loads of human studies, but rat models are really promising. There's a lot of off-label use in it. It's pretty big in the peptide world and all of that stuff. It's not a peptide, but that's going to increase the electron transport chain, so ATP generation in the brain, and also seems to clear neural inflammation as well. That was for those of you with short attention spans. If anyone is interested in reading up full dosings and a written breakdown, you can go to biologic.beehive.com. That will all be there. YouTube doesn't let me link anything yet. Right, so now let's break down the science, some of the dosing in a little bit more detail. Let's start with caffeine. This is the most ubiquitous, most loved stimulant in the world. Do I love it? Yes. Is everyone basically addicted to it? Yes. Is that always a good thing? No. Should you drink more cups of coffee when you're sleep deprived? Almost certainly not. Why is that? Well, caffeine's primary mechanism of action is through sympathetic nervous system activation, meaning fight or flight. Oh crap, a bear's going to attack me. That's the pathway it's acting through. So it's going to increase circulating cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline, and that's going to have effects like increased heart rate, alertness, processing speed, and even verbal fluency, provided the dose is appropriate. Now, why do we not want more of that? Well, we have this normal amount of sympathetic tone, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline. When we're sleep deprived, we actually have a slightly higher level anyway. The coffee's going to take that level higher. If you think slamming 10 cups of coffee is going to make it better, firstly, your heart rate's going to be uncontrollable. You potentially get jittery. Overstimulation and excitation of neurons actually creates brain fog. And there's going to be a cost the next day to clearing all of these neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters need to be broken down again. If you only have to recycle 3 milk cartons versus 50 milk cartons, it's a little bit easier to do the former. Same thing happens with neurotransmitters, basically. So in short, you'll probably overstimulate yourself if you have too much. You'll make your sleep shit, and it'll make tomorrow's neurotransmission worse because of what I just talked about with recycling, but also overexcitation, noradrenergic inhibition, which can kind of be explained as if here's the receptor and you flood it with too much adrenaline tomorrow, it will be desensitized the next day. Similar to if I take a megaphone and scream in your ear, "Wake up!" as loud as I can, you're probably going to go a bit deaf, and I might have to shout even louder tomorrow for you to hear me. Similar kind of analogy. So that's the caffeine. Maybe have slightly more than usual. So if you normally have nothing, 1 cup, amazing. If you normally have 1 cup, maybe 2 cups, spread that across the day. And then we're going to our next one, which should be L-theanine. Now, in absence of caffeine, L-theanine has some effects on glutamate, which is your primary excitatory neuron. So lots of glutamate means excitation, overstimmed, jittery. It kind of blocks that and brings us back down. So even in absence of caffeine, it's doing that. In the presence of caffeine, we can see how that might balance out that neurotransmission of jitteriness and more calmingness. So it has effects on the parasympathetic branch. However, it's also been studied in combination with caffeine and is shown to basically attenuate, improve not attenuate, the word is not attenuate, improve all of the effects that caffeine already has. So this compound's been shown to further improve working memory, recall, verbal fluency, etc. When we're looking at dosing, we're looking at about a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 ratio. A cup of coffee is about 100 milligrams. You want about 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams of L-theanine per cup of coffee. Capsules will be much easier than powder. I'm just cheap, so I buy powder. Now let's move on to the next one, and that's going to be creatine. So creatine has been shown to improve cognitive performance when you are in sleep deprivation. How does it do this? It's through its modulation of phosphocreatine stores in the brain. In short, sleep deprivation is going to lower brain phosphocreatine, and that's going to alter ATP or energy availability, and it's going to worsen processing speed, working memory, and subjective alertness. By high dosing creatine during sleep loss, is going to increase that phosphocreatine store, improve the short-term memory, processing speed, and reaction times against placebo, and this study is shown on the screen here. The dosing for this, however, was insane, 0.35 grams per kilo, meaning for me, a 93-kilo man, that is 32.5 grams. That might cause some digestive issues, and what I want to highlight is if you're stacking multiple of these together, you probably don't need to go on the upper end of that dosing range. The next one is L-tyrosine, as I said, precursor to dopamine. Mechanism of action for this one on how it works on sleep deprivation is a little bit more unknown, but if we pull up the study real quick, this is a study that looked at the effects of tyrosine on cognitive and motor performance during sleep deprivation. Now, the key quote here is, although less effective than D-amphetamine, tyrosine improved performance on several tests, including visual scanning, running memory, logical reasoning, and mathematical processing. So yeah, L-tyrosine isn't as effective as an amphetamine, and if you're thinking, I've heard amphetamine before, yes, that is the same as methamphetamine, as in crystal meth. Fun fact about that, they used methamphetamine pills, it's called Pervitin, weird name. In World War II, the German soldiers took this so that they could march for days and days. And unsurprisingly, tyrosine isn't as effective as that. But that's quite a high bar. In this study, they were looking at 150 milligrams per kilogram, and it showed improvements in most cognitive tests during 24-hour stints of no sleep. Now, if you want to go for the 150 milligrams per kilogram, so that would be about 15 grams for an 100-kilo male, great. Again, if you're stacking a lot of these, you can go a little bit lower on that. Now let's move on to the final one, and that is going to be Methylene Blue. So as I mentioned on Methylene Blue, this one, I'm not going to recommend any dosing protocols or anything like that because there's very limited human data. Have I and many others seen it to be effective? Absolutely. But there's a little bit more risk when we don't have any human trials. However, what I can highlight is that in mice, a very low dose of Methylene Blue during 72-hour sleep deprivation shows improvements in maze performance, social interaction, etc. How does it do this? Well, this acts as an agent on the electron transport chain, so improving energy output, and that supposedly is going to be happening in the brain as well. By increasing that energy availability in the brain, you increase cognition. It also acts as an alternative electron carrier in the electron transport chain, so further allowing that increase in ATP. And it's also going to lower reactive oxygen species because it acts as an antioxidant. So sleep deprivation is going to impair some of these mitochondrial respiration functions. Methylene Blue is going to go against this. As I said, not loads of work in humans on sleep deprivation. However, there's a lot of work on humans in other places, and at low doses, Methylene Blue has a pretty benign profile. And another interesting fact about it is that it has some MAO inhibition, monoamine oxidase inhibition, meaning that it's going to decrease the breakdown of things like serotonin and dopamine. Now, that can be amazing in this state of sleep deprivation where you want more of those neurotransmitters available. And when we're supplementing with a precursor like L-tyrosine, we get a bit of synergy there. However, if you're someone on an SSRI or something like that, you put yourself at risk of serotonin toxicity. Not going to recommend doses on that, but now let's wrap up basically what I've said about all of this here. So putting all of this together, If you're only using one of these compounds, it could be a higher dose. If you're using multiple, be more conservative. So if we're talking about L-tyrosine, we're looking at 50 to 150 milligrams per kilogram. When we're looking at creatine, 0.15 to 0.35 grams per kilogram of creatine. One coffee, maybe two if you're a habitual large drinker, but realistically the coffee dose is going to be based off of what you habitually drink. And considering that there's about 100 milligrams of caffeine per coffee, you want twice as much-ish L-theanine as caffeine. An example of me, when I had this case, is I took about 10 grams of L-tyrosine. That puts me in the middle of that suggested reference range. 20 grams of creatine also puts me in the middle of that suggested reference range. I took one coffee. I am not a habitual coffee drinker currently. However, if I was, I'd be thinking maybe two. With 200 milligrams of L-theanine, and then I took another coffee, although I only had about half, around midday, with another 200 milligrams of L-theanine. And despite 3 hours of sleep, I felt fresh as a daisy. And yes, final thing, please sleep. Catch up on the sleep. You need it. There is no way to get around the need for sleep.